This is the story of Adlet Mayer, a guy who confidently struts around claiming to be the strongest man in the world. Yeah, you heard that right, he's got an ego big enough to fill an entire arena. But don't let his self-proclaimed title fool you. Adlet is basically a walking disaster wrapped in a hero's outfit. From crashing into tournaments uninvited to throwing around smoke bombs like party favors, his idea of strength is more about causing chaos than actual skill. Adlet's journey begins when he's chosen to be one of the Braves, the 6 legendary heroes destined to save the world from the evil demon god. Except in typical Adlet fashion, things don't exactly go smoothly. For one, there are 7 Braves, which means someone's a fake, and knowing Adlet, he's probably going to make it harder than it needs to be. Armed with his overconfidence, a bag of cheap tricks, and a questionable sense of strategy, Adlet charges headfirst into every situation, usually making things worse before they get better. But for all his bluster and bravado, Adlet's heart is in the right place. He just has a funny way of showing it. Whether he's dodging attacks, annoying his teammates, or somehow stumbling onto the truth, you can't help but root for him, even if he's probably the last person you want leading the charge. Legend has it, every time demons try to sneak out of their cozy little world of darkness, the human world turns into a flaming dumpster fire of chaos. It's like they're on a mission to ruin everyone's day. To stop this, the goddess of fate steps in like an overworked superhero, handpicking 6 individuals to save the world. Always 6, no more, no less. These 6 poor souls, tasked with saving the world, are forever known as the Braves of the 6 Flowers. You'd think with such a grand title, life would be glamorous, but nope, it's all blood, sweat, and demon guts. Now in the bustling kingdom of Pina, known for its booming trade, and let's be honest, probably overpriced goods, a semi-final match is about to kick off in the Grand Arena. This is no backyard wrestling match, it's the holy tournament that decides who gets to call themselves one of the Braves. Things are heating up between 2 powerhouses, Batolo Rainhawk, the pride of Pina, and Quedogain, the powerhouse from the nation of Tomaso. They're both vying for the title, ready to throw punches, kicks, and egos around. The general overseeing the match, probably hoping for a peaceful day, reminds everyone that this duel is being held under the watchful eyes of Pina's king and the gods themselves. You know, it's a casual reminder to keep things clean and fair. And then, like a walking meme with a god complex, struts Adlet Mayer, the self-proclaimed strongest man in the world. You can almost hear the air of superiority following him as he saunters into the kingdom of Pina, acting like the whole place is his personal stage. The guy isn't here for some light sparring. Oh no, he's here to flex in front of the goddess of fate herself. His goal is simple. He wants to become a Brave. Now here's the thing about Adlet. He's not exactly known for subtlety. He's the kind of guy who tells anyone within earshot that he's the strongest in the world, and of course the goddess has to pick him. After all, who could resist someone so modest? Spoiler, everyone. If overconfidence were a sport, Adlet would be an Olympic gold medalist, while everyone else is just trying to figure out how he fits his ego through the door. But let's give credit where it's due. Adlet isn't just running his mouth without reason. Beneath his inflated ego lies real skill and intelligence, which he's earned through years of grueling experience. But that's less impressive when you realize that he got those abilities by surviving under the iron fist of Atro Spiker, a teacher so cruel that you start to wonder if Adlet had signed up for a fighting school or a medieval torture camp. To say Atro was a harsh mentor would be like saying the ocean is slightly damp. Adlet didn't just lose weight during training, he practically evaporated. The other students, they pieced out faster than you can say no thanks, leaving Adlet to train alone because he was too stubborn or too dense to quit. Adlet somehow survived not because he was tough, but because his ambition was thicker than his common sense. He had this insane drive to become the strongest person in the world, even if it meant getting beaten down every day. You can almost hear Atro shaking his head in disbelief, wondering how Adlet kept showing up. Honestly, it's like watching someone willingly walk into a brick wall repeatedly, convinced that the wall will eventually move. Spoiler, it doesn't. Armed with all the brutal lessons Atro beat into him, Adlet takes that over-the-top arrogance and channels it right into action, strutting into the tournament like the world has been on pause, just waiting for his arrival. It's so him to think that barging into a sacred competition of seasoned warriors is a perfectly normal Tuesday activity, because why would he have an ounce of chill when he could make a grand entrance instead? The tournament was supposed to be a showcase of skill, honor, and strength, with the winner eventually getting the chance to face Princess Nashtania, the reigning champion. It had all the makings of a glorious, respectable event until Adlet, our human wrecking ball, decided to throw himself right into the mix. Naturally, he couldn't let anyone finish in peace. Nope. He charges into the middle of the fight, turning the whole thing into a circus act, and because he's that guy, challenges both warriors at once. Why stop at one when you can flex in front of two? In his mind, when you're the so-called strongest man in the world, you might as well double the drama. As expected, the royal guards aren't exactly thrilled with Adlet's antics and rush to contain him. But Adlet is more than ready for this showdown. Like a magician pulling endless rabbits out of a hat, he starts whipping out needles and flinging them like party favors. The guards drop like they've been hit by a confetti cannon, utterly unprepared for Adlet's chaotic brand of fighting. You'd think they'd put up more of a fight, but one flashy move from Adlet and they're flat on the ground. It's almost too easy for him, like swatting away flies while making a spectacle of himself. Seeing Adlet's flashy display, the two warriors are understandably furious and charge at him with the kind of rage you'd expect from people whose fight has been hijacked by a guy with a flair for theatrics. But Adlet, being the show-off he is, dodges their attacks with ease, making it look like he's just dancing through a casual stroll. Then, in true Adlet fashion, he ups the ante by tossing something liquid onto one of the fighters, revealing his stash of smoke bombs. Because nothing says I'm here to steal the spotlight like drowning the entire arena in a cloud of smoke. Soon, the whole place is enveloped in smoke, and amidst the chaos, Adlet effortlessly takes down one of the fighters. Naturally, he does it with style, because why fight when you can fight fabulously? To top it off, he makes sure to throw in a jab about the fighter's armor, suggesting maybe next time, he should invest in something more sturdy if he doesn't want to get smacked around so easily. Classic Adlet never misses an opportunity to rub a little salt in the wound with that sharp tongue of his. But because Adlet never does anything without turning it into a spectacle, he walks straight up to the statue of the goddess, chest puffed out like he's already a legend, and boldly declares his victory. And if that wasn't enough, he goes so far as to threaten the gods, warning them that if they don't choose him as one of the braves, they'll regret it later. Talk about confidence, Adlet's got enough to fill the whole arena, and then some. So technically, Adlet won the tournament, kind of. But let's be real, it wasn't exactly a victory worth celebrating. Instead of a hero's welcome, the crowd was furious. They didn't just boo him, they started chucking stones at him like he was the world's worst juggler. Even the royal guards joined the show, slapping some cuffs on him and hauling him off to prison. Turns out, messing with the sacred tournament isn't the kind of thing that gets you a trophy, unless you count a lifetime prison sentence as a prize. And just like that, Adlet's grand moment of victory spiraled into a not-so-glorious ending. A one-way trip to a dark, musty cell. Turns out, interrupting a prestigious tournament and mocking everyone wasn't exactly the recipe for success. But hey, Adlet never met a situation he couldn't turn into chaos. While Adlet sulks in his cell and walks a girl, rushing over like she's meeting her favorite celebrity, because apparently that's how Adlet sees himself. She gushes about how she saw his fight in the arena and was thoroughly impressed, so much so that she's declared herself his #1 fan. She asks to shake his hand, but Adlet, being Adlet, turns beet red at the attention. The girl teases him, pointing out that he doesn't even know how to shake hands properly. But Adlet, forever quick to remind everyone within earshot, recovers by confidently stating that of course he's the strongest man in the world. Awkwardness, who cares when you're the best, right? The girl, intrigued and entertained, asks Adlet to share more about his backstory. Never one to turn down the chance to talk about himself, Adlet happily obliges. He tells her his name as if she didn't already know, explains that he's 18 years old and hails from the nation of Aurora. Cue the dramatic tale. At the tender age of 10, he left home to train under his ruthless master, Atro Spiker, in the mountains. Adlet spares no detail, making it crystal clear that his entire life has been dedicated to becoming strong enough to defeat the demon god. Years of grueling training have shaped him into the world's strongest, at least in his own mind. The girl, amused by his bravado, playfully suggests that there might be stronger people out there. But Adlet, not even a little bit fazed, with the confidence only he can muster, he declares that while there might be many strong people, none, absolutely none, are stronger than him. Not even the gods themselves. His mission is simple: defeat the demon god, bring peace to the world, and of course become one of the braves. And as far as Adlet's concerned, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when he'll be chosen. A flashback shows that a time long ago, the demon god unleashed pure chaos across the continent. Entire empires crumbled under his might, villages were reduced to ashes, and the people, overwhelmed by fear, could do little but accept their grim fate. It was like one long, miserable episode of destruction. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the goddess of fate made her grand entrance. She swooped in and sealed the demon god away and saved the day. However, because the universe loves a cliffhanger, she warned everyone that the demon god wasn't truly dead and could return at any moment. The goddess promised that when the time came, her power would be passed on to 6 heroes, the braves of the 6 flowers, to save the world once again. The girl recounts how the braves first appeared 700 years ago, banding together to defeat the demon god. This wasn't a one-time deal either. even 100 years ago, 6 more braves were called upon to challenge the demon god. As she wraps up her dramatic history lesson, she couldn't resist getting in one last playful jab, teasing Adlet that he might want to stay in his cell until his body stops trembling from all that strength he's always bragging about. With a cheeky grin, she leaves Adlet behind, laughing as he sits there wondering how she even managed to waltz into such a supposedly high-security prison. The next day, reality smacks Adlet hard. He's dragged before the king for his punishment, which, spoiler alert, doesn't include a hero's parade. Instead, he's tossed into a deep underground cell far from the city, because clearly the king wasn't impressed with Adlet's dramatic tournament interruption. Locked up tight, days turn into nights, and Adlet spends his time doing what he does best, training and somehow surviving on rainwater, all while fantasizing about his next big moment in the spotlight. Even in the harshest conditions, he refuses to let go of his dream, because if there's one thing Adlet is good at, it's perseverance. Or, stubbornness. Almost a year passes with Adlet stuck behind bars, probably wondering why his so-called charm didn't get him out of this mess sooner. The skies decide to do him a favor by turning an ominous shade of red. That could only mean one thing: the demon god has woken up from his long nap, ready to stir up some chaos. The demon god had been around since forever, spreading disaster and probably putting the fear of doom into everyone's breakfast routine. But long ago, some legendary hero called the Flower Knight had managed to defeat the demon god, and before piecing out, the knight predicted the demon god would rise again someday. And here Adlet was locked up with a front row seat to all the action. Figures that the world's greatest disaster would wake up just in time for Adlet to miss out on the fun. Maybe the demon god sensed a kindred spirit in Adlet, both of them turning everything into chaos. Only difference is one's a demon and the other's just Adlet. The legend had it, when the demon god awakened, 6 braves would be marked with a special flower tattoo, and wouldn't you know it, our boy Adlet ended up with one. Just as the sky turned an ominous red, a strange light enveloped Adlet and a flower tattoo bloomed on his hand. Of course, because why would the universe pick the most obnoxious guy around? Naturally, Adlet started celebrating like he just won the lottery, as if being picked for this life or death mission was some kind of prize. This guy truly knows how to find the bright side, probably because there's no room for doubt in a head that's full of self-importance. As he's busy doing his victory dance in a jail cell, the same girl from earlier, who turns out to be the Princess Nakatania, shows up. To drop another bombshell, turns out she's been chosen as a brave too, because obviously fate needed a competent counterpart to balance out Adlet's overblown ego. With little fanfare, she busts him out of jail, probably wondering how she got stuck with this guy as a teammate. Together, they ride out of town on horseback, setting off to find the other 4 braves. And let's be honest, Adlet's probably doing most of the talking while Nachitnia silently questions every life choice that brought her here. Adlet arrives at his hideout, and like any good adventurer, he grabs all the essentials for the journey ahead. You know the basics: weapons, supplies, maybe a little more ego. He's all set to go, looking like he's about to conquer the world, or at least try to, while making sure everyone knows how strong he is. Meanwhile, Princess Nachitania is just strolling through town, casually snagging fruit from a vendor without so much as a glance at the price. Adlet, ever the chivalrous guy, steps in and pays the vendor, probably rolling his eyes internally. As the princess brushes it off, she makes a comment about how, when she was younger, she thought fruit magically appeared on plates. Adlet's just standing there like, yeah, of course, because princesses and logic don't mix. As they continue walking, Nachitnia snatches a carrot from yet another vendor, and once again, Adlet's left to foot the bill. You can almost hear him sighing, wondering how he ended up playing royal babysitter. But just when he thinks things can't get weirder, they do. Nachitnia, in true look-at-me fashion, whips out her magic and dramatically slices the carrot. She's basically having a check out my awesome powers moment, showing off her skills as she's auditioning for a magical cooking show. Then things take a turn for the bizarre. Clearly feeling the need to up her show-off game, Nachitnia casually conjures a massive amount of blood out of thin air. Because, why not? She dramatically waves it in front of Adlet like it's no big deal. Naturally, Adlet, who's been through a lot, is both shocked and utterly grossed out. He touches the blood and immediately regrets it, feeling queasy, because let's be real, who wouldn't get freaked out by a spontaneous blood magic trick? Nachitnia, ever the mischief maker, teases him, guessing that this is way out of his comfort zone. Adlet, being the overly proud guy he is, tries to act unfazed as if blood sorcery is just another Tuesday for him. But Nachitnia isn't buying it, casually revealing that even someone chosen by the gods once got freaked out by her powers. Adlet's response is classic Adlet. He brushes it off with his go-to line, declaring that he's the strongest man in the world, as if that's supposed to make blood magic less creepy. Nachitnia, however, isn't done with her antics. She cranks up the weirdness by unleashing even more blood all over Adlet, probably just to see him squirm. And squirm he does. Adlet freaks out, demanding to know if she's lost her mind. Nachitania, completely amused by the chaos she's caused, just laughs it off like it's the funniest thing in the world, casually noting how easy it is for her to do this kind of stuff. Eventually, Adlet's patience runs out and gets genuinely angry. Seeing that she's pushed him far enough, Nachitania finally backs down and apologizes, admitting that she's a bit of a wild type. Even her maids call her crazy, so this is apparently just another day in the life of Nachitania. Adlet begrudgingly accepts her apology, though he makes it clear that she can stop apologizing now. That's when Nachitania drops the real bomb. Did Adlet actually think she was serious about all this? She was just messing with him the whole time. Adlet, unsurprisingly, is not impressed. You can practically hear the internal facepalm happening as he realizes he's just been dragged through a magical prank session. As they ride on, Adlet tries to reel things in, reminding Nachitania that they're on their way to defeat the demon god, and maybe it's time to dial down the jokes. After all, they're not exactly on a joyride. Nachitania naturally just laughs it off, saying how much fun she's having spending time with someone like him. This catches Adlet off guard, leaving him a little flustered, not exactly used to being the source of someone's entertainment outside of combat. With Nachitania's playful teasing keeping things lively, the two press forward on their journey, though Adlet probably wonders if the strongest man in the world title comes with an off switch for all the chaos she brings. Nachitania's relentless lightheartedness becomes a strange sort of companion, even as they march towards something as deadly serious as taking down the demon god. Later that night, when the stars are out and the adrenaline is cooled, Nachitania surprises Adlet by opening up about herself. Turns out she's not just a princess, she's a saint of blades, meaning she can control sharp weapons at will. So she's not only royalty, but also a walking arsenal. Saints, as it happens, are women blessed with special abilities by the gods. Only women can become saints, which means Adlet is forever stuck on the sidelines of that club, no matter how much he insists on being the strongest in the world. Sorry, Adlet, but no amount of bravado is going to turn you into a saint, though he'd probably argue with a goddess if he could. But Nachitania isn't just any saint, she's also the daughter of the king of Pina. So not only can she control sharp weapons with her mind, she's got the royal bloodline to back it up. Sadly though, her family was wiped out during civil war 6 years ago, leaving the kingdom in the hands of a bunch of prime ministers who probably couldn't hold a sword without cutting themselves. Nachitania casually drops this heavy backstory on Adlet, and you can practically see him trying to process the fact that the woman who just saved his arrogant hide is also a royal badass. To make things even more interesting, Nachitania tells Adlet about Goldov, a knight who's as strong as she is and unlike Adlet doesn't need to keep shouting about it. Despite his youth, Goldov is reliable, loyal, and has sworn his allegiance to Nachitania. That's right, while Adlet is busy bragging about being the strongest, Goldov is out here actually doing the job with quiet competence. Maybe Adlet should take some notes, but let's be honest, he probably won't. Given that Goldov is trustworthy and actually knows what he's doing, they decide to enlist his help in finding the other Braves. After a few days of traveling, Adlet and Nachitania find themselves in a region where demons are wreaking havoc, forcing the inhabitants to evacuate. Naturally, Adlet's first instinct is to play hero. Feeling a rare moment of pity, or maybe just looking for another opportunity to show off, they decide to take out the demons and help treat the injured villagers. As they're tending to the wounded, someone mentions there's still a girl left behind in the village. Adlet, seeing this as the perfect moment to add savior to his growing list of titles, rushes off to rescue her. Meanwhile, Nachitania stays behind to handle the more practical task of looking after the villagers, because someone has to do the real work after all. But when Adlet finally arrives at the village ready to bust out his hero routine, he's met with a surprise. The monsters are already dead, which leaves him looking more like an unnecessary guest than a rescuer. Typical Adlet arrives just in time to take credit for work he didn't even do. It was at this moment that Adlet finally put two and two together, something that doesn't happen often with him. The girl hadn't been left behind at all. She had stayed there on purpose to fight the monsters herself. After wandering around the village for a while, probably pretending this was some grand rescue mission, Adlet finally spots what he's looking for. He sees a girl standing in front of a fallen companion, a small dog at her side. Clearly, this isn't your typical damsel in distress situation. Adlet approaches, ready to throw on his heroic charm, but the girl, Flamey, skips the pleasantries and immediately asks if he likes dogs. Adlet, ever the people pleaser, or dog pleaser in this case, replies that he likes both dogs and humans. Flamey, however, doesn't share his enthusiasm and coldly admits she couldn't care less about people. She raises her gun, eyes locked on Adlet, clearly not buying into his friendly vibes. But Adlet's sharp eyes catch something important, the mark of the 6 flowers on her hand. She grills him, asking if he's here to kill her. Adlet, caught off guard, shows his own mark, explaining that he too is one of the 6 Braves. Things should have gotten easier after that, but Flamey isn't exactly in a trusting mood. Introducing herself as Flamey Speeddraw, she refuses to lower her weapon. Adlet tries to calm the situation down, asking her to put the gun away, but Flamey isn't having it. She fires a warning shot, missing on purpose, just to let him know she's not messing around. With her magic, she loads up another bullet, demanding the truth, convinced that Adlet might be trying to take her out. Adlet, doing his best not to lose his cool, reassures her that he's not a threat, but the tension between them lingers like a bad smell. Meanwhile, back where Nachitania is trying to keep things somewhat sane, Goldo finally shows up, late to the party as usual, but with big news in tow. Turns out, Goldo's also been chosen as a Brave, but that's not the biggest shocker. He tells Nachitania something that makes even her playful demeanor freeze for a second. There's a Brave known as Flamey, a mysterious girl with white hair and a gun always by her side. The kicker is Flamey's not just any Brave, she's got a reputation as a Brave killer. Meanwhile, Flamey has her gun aimed right at Adlet, because nothing says hello quite like pointing a weapon at someone. Flamey wastes no time reminding him that she's heard of him before, the so-called cowardly warrior from the arena tournament, with a reputation for being a complete scumbag. Adlet, never one to let an insult slide, immediately jumps to defend his oversized pride. He proclaims with the usual bravado that he's the strongest man in the world, because of course no one else could possibly compete with him. He goes on to explain that using every trick in the book doesn't make him a coward, it makes him the smartest guy in the room. In his mind, bending the rules is just part of being a tactical genius. After all, only someone as mighty as him would have the audacity to call themselves the strongest. A coward wouldn't even have the guts to dream it right. His logic flows as smoothly as his overinflated ego, but still, he demands that she lower her gun, as if that's supposed to settle things. Flamey, unfazed by Adlet's verbal acrobatics, cuts straight to the point and asks where his companions are. Ever the showman, Adlet mentions Nachitania, the princess of Pina and the Blade Saint, no less. His tone practically screams, "I roll with royalty," but Flamey barely reacts. She calmly tells him to pass along a message to Nachitania and the others. She introduces herself as Flamey Speeddraw, the Saint of Gunpowder, and declares she's not joining their little band of merry heroes. Nope, she plans to take down the demon god on her own. She makes it clear she won't get in their way, so they better stay out of hers. Adlet, as usual, tries to question her, but before he can get too far, Flamey fires off a shot that sends his poor horse into a full-blown panic. Now Adlet finds himself in an entirely different battle against an out-of-control horse. As he tries to calm the crazed animal, Flamey takes off running, because why not make things even harder for him? Yelling after her, Adlet manages to grab his gear just before the horse bolts off, leaving him stranded and having to chase her on foot. He stumbles through the jungle, muttering about where she could have gone. The grass, the bushes, he checks everywhere, frustrated that she's vanished so quickly. Perched in a tree, Adlet pulls out his trusty scope, scanning the area like a wannabe sniper. Finally, after what feels like ages, he spots her in the distance. She's good at running, he'll give her that. Meanwhile, Flamey, sensing Adlet closing in, wonders how in the world he managed to track her from so far away. She's not impressed, but slightly concerned by his persistence. Adlet, determined to play the hero, continues following her through the thick jungle. Until, surprise, he jumps right in front of her path, blocking her way. He's had enough of this chase. Flamey, genuinely surprised, admits she can't believe he actually caught up to her. She wants to know why he bothered to chase her this far. Adlet, not entirely sure himself, just throws out a vague response, more confused than ever. Flamey, however, isn't done with her threats. She makes it crystal clear. If he continues to follow her, she'll shoot. But Adlet, true to form, responds with his usual grace and subtlety by telling her to shut up. He knows full well that she can't handle the demon god alone. If all 6 of them don't work together, they don't stand a chance. It's not just about strength, it's about teamwork, though Adlet would never admit he needs help. Still, even he knows that without everyone on board, they're doomed. Flamey, whether she likes it or not, might just have to deal with him a little longer. Flamey offers to prove she can win on her own if Adlet insists on doubting her. She's made up her mind she's going solo, no need for companions, no desire to meet the other Braves. Adlet, confused by her determination to isolate herself, asks why she won't join forces with the rest of the team. Her response is bleak. If she meets them, it's certain they'll try to kill her. Adlet, ever the optimist, or perhaps just naive, protests. They're all Braves of the Flowers, united by a common purpose. Why would anyone kill one of their own? But Flamey, unfazed, lays out his options. He can hear her reasons, and they'll likely end up trying to kill each other, or he can walk away now. She's certain that if she tells him the truth, He'll turn on her just like the others would. Flamey reiterates her plan to fight the demon god alone, telling Adlet to do whatever he wants. Ideally, she'd prefer to never see him again. And with that, she runs off, planning to shake him for good this time. But Adlet, never one to make things easy, pulls out his signature cheap smoke bomb trick and quickly catches up to her. After some dodging and back and forth maneuvers, he manages to snatch her bag of ammo, leaving Flamey visibly irritated. Her frustration boiling over, Flamey demands to know what he's doing, while Adlet, in typical fashion, smugly declares he's doing exactly what he wants to do. Flamey, now even more aggravated, questions whether he's mocking her or just playing foolish. Adlet, unfazed, insists he's coming with her, daring her to shoot him. If she can't take him down in one shot, he threatens to run off with her precious ammunition. Flamey, clearly reaching the end of her patience, orders him to return her things. But Adlet, ever the know-it-all, lectures her about the weakness of guns. Without bullets, they're useless. He lets her know that she could try to take them back, but he'll just chase after her again. He's confident she won't escape, and he makes sure she knows it. As Flamey keeps her gun aimed at Adlet, frustration building, he continues his moral grandstanding, reminding her that the land of howling demons awaits them, home of the demon god and his fiends. He repeats her words about the other braves wanting to kill her, but he's already made up his mind. Adlet claims that the strongest man in the world can't just abandon a comrade in trouble, and in his mind that means he's decided to save her, whether she likes it or not. Flamey, fed up with his antics, mutters her disdain, but Adlet shuts her down, telling her to quit complaining. With that, he starts walking away, not even looking back, fully expecting her to follow. Flamey, still aiming her gun at him, torn between shooting him and walking away, hesitates. Eventually, she decides against pulling the trigger. Something about him baffles her. What kind of guy is he? Reluctantly, she starts following him, unsure of what exactly she's gotten herself into. Some time passes, and Nakshania and Golda finally arrive at the village. By this point, though, Adlet is already long gone, having left with Flamey. True to form, he doesn't bother to wait or explain much. Instead, he leaves a hastily scribbled note on his horse, casually telling Nakshania to head to the Braves' gathering place without him or Flamey, which apparently decided to join him. Classic Adlet, always off on his own agenda, leaving everyone else to figure out the details. Meanwhile, Adlet and Flamey have already traveled quite a distance from the village. They arrive in a fortress where soldiers greet them with a mixture of relief and exhaustion. The fortress stands uncomfortably close to the territory of the demon god, which means it has been under constant attack. The evidence is everywhere. Bodies of humans and demons litter the surroundings, a gruesome reminder of the ongoing battle between good and evil. But for Adlet, this probably feels like just another opportunity to flex his so-called strength. The leader of the fortress guards wastes no time. Clearly desperate, he asks Adlet and Flamey to help activate a barrier at a nearby temple to fend off the demon onslaught. It's a risky task, but of course, Adlet jumps at the chance, no doubt seeing this as another opportunity to prove his self-proclaimed title of the strongest. Flamey, on the other hand, just looks like she's bracing herself for yet another round of putting up with Adlet's antics, wondering how she got stuck in this odd partnership. The good news, according to the leader of the guards, is that a brave named Mora is already waiting at the shrine, ready to meet up with the rest of the group. But, as with all good news, there's always a catch. The bad news is once the barrier at the shrine is activated, one of the Braves has to stay inside permanently. Whoever gets stuck in there isn't getting out anytime soon. So with that unsettling tidbit hanging over them, and after learning how to activate the barrier, Adlet and Flamey set off once again. As they continue their journey, Flamey suddenly drops a cryptic and unsettling comment. When all the Braves finally meet, it'll end up killing each other. Classic Flamey, always the ray of sunshine. Before Adlet can even process what she means or ask for clarification, things take a sharp turn. Out of nowhere, two figures launch an attack on Flamey. Turns out it's none other than Goldov and Nakshania, both looking ready to throw down. Without hesitation, Goldov and Nakshania urge Adlet to back away from Flamey, clearly viewing her as a major threat. Their instincts are sharp after all, who wouldn't be suspicious of someone as cold and distant as the so-called saint of gunpowder. But Adlet, ever the peacekeeper, or so he likes to think, steps in to try and stop the brewing conflict. Goldov, however, isn't in the mood for a debate and shoves Adlet aside, ready to take action. Desperate to end the fight before it begins, Adlet shouts for them to stop, declaring that Flamey isn't their enemy after all, she's one of the Braves. His words hang in the air, leaving Nakshania and Goldov momentarily stunned. That's when they drop a bombshell. They inform Adlet that Flamey is no ordinary Brave, she's the Brave Killer. Flamey, never one to mince words, doesn't bother denying it. In fact, she calmly confirms that yes, she is indeed the infamous killer. To drive the point home, Flamey lists off some of her victims. Matora Wichita, Fudelka Hori, and Ashirai Yara, all once potential Braves, now reduced to footnotes in her bloody history. She then levels her gun at Goldov and Nach Tanya, making it clear that they too are on her hit list. It's all very businesslike for her. But the tension in the air is palpable. Adlet, still trying to make sense of the situation, asks if Lura was also one of her targets. Flamey confirms that Lura had been on her list, though she's unsure of what ultimately happened to her. With every answer, the situation grows more complicated, and Adlet can't help but wonder what drives her. Finally, he demands to know why she killed all the potential Braves. Flamey's response is as cold as ever. She explains that if only weak warriors remained to be chosen as Braves, the Majin, the demon god, would be able to return. Her strategy is simple and brutal: eliminate the strongest and weaken the Braves from within. For Flamey, it's all about keeping the stakes as low as possible, even if it means turning the whole group against her. Goldov and Nach Tanya, now fully convinced that Flamey is their enemy, prepare to kill her without hesitation. Adlet, never one to back down from a dramatic showdown, steps in to block them. He refuses to believe that someone chosen as a Brave could be plotting to revive the Majin. His logic, of course, is as simple as ever: there's no way the goddess would pick a traitor. Right. With a mixture of defiance and stubbornness, Adlet declares that if it comes down to it, he'll side with Flamey. Nothing screams great idea like teaming up with someone who's openly admitted to being a killer. Nach Tanya, after a moment of tense contemplation, finally relents and agrees with Adlet. She tells Goldov they'll stop fighting, for now at least. But she makes it clear to Flamey that while she might be backing off, she still doesn't trust her. In fact, the only person Nach Tanya trusts is Adlet, which, let's be honest, isn't exactly the best endorsement, given his track record of questionable decisions. With the tension somewhat diffused, the group moves on, heading toward Mora. However, their path takes a sudden turn when they notice several flying Huma headed straight for the temple. The sense of urgency skyrockets as the Braves rush toward the temple, only to be blocked by a different group of Kuma. A battle breaks out, with everyone throwing themselves into the fight. In the heat of it all, Nach Tanya orders Adlet to go ahead to the temple while they hold off the creatures. When Adlet reaches the temple, things quickly take a turn for the weird. He finds an injured priestess and, like any would-be hero, tries to help. But instead of accepting his aid, she insists he go inside immediately. Adlet, being Adlet, tries to open the door, but doesn't budge. Naturally, his solution is to blow it open with some handy explosives, because when in doubt, always choose the loudest option. As soon as the door blasts open, two armored soldiers come charging out and attack Adlet, catching him completely off guard. In the middle of trying not to get skewered, Adlet turns to ask the priestess what's going on, only to realize she's not even human. She's a shape-shifting Kuma, and before Adlet can get any answers, she escapes, leaving him standing there, likely wondering how he keeps finding himself in these situations. After dealing with the armored soldiers, which turn out to be nothing more than empty suits of armor, Adlet is left with an unsettling sense of dread creeping over him. As he approaches the temple, he notices mist slowly rising from the ground, a chilling sign that something has gone horribly wrong. His gut twists with the realization that someone may have already activated the barrier. Bracing himself, Adlet pushes into the temple and enters the activation chamber, only to find his worst fear confirmed. The sword is already plunged into the pedestal, the barrier clearly activated, and the room is eerily empty, devoid of any sign of who could have done it. Moments later, Nach Tanya, Flamey, and Goldov arrive. Nach Tanya, wasting no time, immediately accuses Adlet of activating the barrier. It's always the guy standing closest to the crime scene, right? But Adlet, for once actually being innocent, protests and insists it wasn't him. He points out that someone else must have activated it and vanished before he arrived. The group, now realizing the severity of the situation, begins to worry that they might be trapped inside the temple with no way out. They move closer to the pedestal, hoping to figure out what happened. Goldov, ever the man of action, decides to test things by removing the sword in an attempt to turn off the barrier. With a heavy pull, he yanks the sword free, but their relief is short-lived. Flamey, ever vigilant, notes that the fog remains thick and ominous. Removing the sword hasn't made a difference, the barrier is still up, and they're just as trapped as before. Adlet, ever the man with a plan, or at least pretending he has one, tries to take matters into his own hands. He cuts his hand, letting the blood drip onto the pedestal while reciting, with all the dramatic flair he can muster, "Barrier, release." Unsurprisingly, nothing happens, because when has Adlet's theatrics ever gone according to plan? The barrier remains firmly in place, as if mocking him. Nach Tanya, however, isn't in the mood for calm logic either. Panicking, she grabs the sword and furiously attacks the pedestal, shouting the same words, "Barrier, release." She declares herself the rightful owner of the barrier, swaying wildly as if brute force alone could solve the problem. In her frenzy, she breaks the stone slab into pieces, but alas, the barrier stubbornly stays up. Flamey, watching the chaotic display, steps in to stop her, reminding her there's no point in panicking. Just as things seem to be spiraling further out of control, the sound of footsteps echoes through the chamber. Amid the mess, something unexpected happens, a new arrival. Chamo, full of confidence and swagger, strolls in, casually asking what's going on. She quickly recognizes everyone in the group except for Adlet, who stands there looking like the odd one out. Naturally, Adlet, never missing a chance to introduce himself, asks who she is. Chamo, with no shortage of self-assurance, introduces herself as another chosen brave, because of course the universe loves throwing more people into this increasingly crowded disaster. Adlet, never one to miss a chance to boast, tells Chamo he's the strongest man in the world. But to his surprise, Chamo is thoroughly unimpressed, mostly because she's convinced she is the strongest person in the world. There's only room for one massive ego in this group, and Chamo is not backing down. Things take a sharp turn as Chamo, without much hesitation, decides that they should start by killing Flamey. Clearly, she's not one for small talk or team-building exercises. Flamey, always ready for a fight, prepares to defend herself, but before things can escalate, Adlet and Naxitania jump in to stop them. Mora arrives just in time to witness the escalating tension. She immediately notices that Chamo was moments away from starting a full-blown fight and steps in, ordering Chamo to stop. With her authoritative air, Mora brings a brief calm to the chaos and quickly shifts the conversation to something even more troubling. She reveals that there is an outsider among them, someone who doesn't belong in the group. As the group exchanges confused glances, Mora explains that she had been traveling with a man named Hans, who she met the previous day and who is also a brave. The revelation that yet another brave has entered the mix sets off alarm bells for Adlet. Taking charge, Adlet orders everyone to show their crests. The room falls into a tense silence as, one by one, each member reveals their flower-shaped mark. And there it is, the shocking reality. There are 7 of them. Adlet, Naxitania, Goldov, Flamey, Chamet, Mora, and now Hans. This completely shatters the established rule that there can only be 6 braves. Mora, now the voice of reason, tells the group the old legend, the story of the saint of the single flower, who split her power into 6 parts to be bestowed upon the braves. Her power was divided in such a way that it was impossible for there to be more or fewer than 6 braves. The fact that there are 7 now is not only an anomaly, but a serious problem. For the first time in history, the carefully chosen group is too large. This bizarre twist throws everyone into confusion. The mood shifts rapidly as suspicion begins to creep in, clouding their judgment. Each brave starts to eye the others warily, silently trying to assess who among them could be the imposter. The conclusion is clear and chilling. One of them isn't a real brave, and that imposter isn't just an outsider, they're an enemy. Of course, the finger-pointing starts almost immediately, and the most obvious target is Flamey. Chamet, being the little ball of confidence she is, wastes no time in accusing her, even backing it up by claiming that Flamey had already tried to kill her once before. According to Chamet, the only reason she survived the assassination attempt was because she's stronger than Flamey. Apparently, being the strongest warrior in the world is a claim that runs rampant in this group, first Adlet, now Chamet. At this rate, the real contest is about who can boast the loudest. Amid the rising tension, Mora, the picture of calm, steps in to offer a more rational solution. She suggests that each of them introduce themselves properly in hopes of spotting the fake brave. It's a reasonable move, though with this crowd, anything could happen. And so one by one, they begin introducing themselves, each trying to sound as trustworthy as possible while the air around them buzzes with suspicion. Mora steps forward, claiming the prestigious title of Saint of Mountains and proudly announcing herself as the leader of all saints in the world. Apparently, anyone who gains power and aims to become a saint has to make the pilgrimage to her. And because of this, she claims to recognize every saint there is. It's quite the resume, and naturally, she's expecting everyone to be impressed by her leadership and authority. Meanwhile, Chamet, the pint-sized powerhouse, introduces herself as the Saint of Swamps, just 14 years old, but already tossing around accusations like she's been in the game for decades. And then there's Hans, a seasoned assassin, sent by his king on a simple mission: kill the demon god. No big deal, just another day at the office for him. Next up is Flamey. As she steps into the spotlight, the first thing she does is ask Mora to remove her blindfold. Everyone expects another shocking twist, but when Mora removes it, the surprise hits them hard. Flamey has physical signs that suggest she's not entirely human. In fact, she's part demon. Flamey doesn't shy away from it. She openly admits that her mother was a demon, though that does little to win her any points with the group. Still, despite her demonic lineage, Flamey stands her ground and claims she isn't the fake brave. Instead, she flips the suspicion onto Mora, accusing her of being the imposter. Hans, ever the cold and calculating assassin, throws a wrench into the tension by agreeing with Flamey he doesn't believe she's the fake brave either, but he's not convinced Mora is the imposter either. His suspicions fall on none other than Adlet. Hans points out that Adlet was the first to enter the temple, and he speculates that Adlet may have activated the barrier on purpose, trapping them all inside. Suddenly, the man who claims to be the strongest in the world is under a cloud of doubt, and you can almost see the gears turning in everyone's heads as the accusations swirl around the room. Hans's suspicions are hard to argue with. Only humans can activate the barrier, and there's no way it activated on its own. Since Adlet was the first to enter the shrine, all eyes quickly turn to him. The mood shifts fast. Now everyone, except for Naxtania, is looking at Adlet with growing suspicion. No matter how hard he tries to defend himself, his words don't sway the others. His explanations only seem to deepen their distrust. Hans and Goldov decide to take matters into their own hands. Instead of waiting for more evidence, they move to attack Adlet. Left with no choice, Adlet uses a flash bomb to create chaos and buys himself some time by taking Flamey hostage. It's a desperate move, but it's all he's got. Unfortunately, Hans isn't about to let him slip away that easily. With swift precision, Hans manages to stab Adlet just before he can escape, causing him to start losing blood. Despite the wound, Adlet flees into the forest, but the blood loss takes its toll and he soon collapses, unconscious amidst the trees. Meanwhile, back at the temple, Hans and the others waste no time. Determined to find Adlet and Flamey, they set off to track them down, knowing that their target couldn't have gotten far in his weakened state. They know Flamey is still kicking because, according to Mora, if a brave kicks the bucket, a petal on their tattoo would vanish. No disappearing petals here, so Flamey is still in the game. Meanwhile, Adlet is having a trip down memory lane. In his dream, he's back in his village, a quaint little spot where life was as peaceful as a kitten nap. But in the grand tradition of let's ruin everything, a demon crashes the party, turning the place into a scene straight out of a horror movie. The village is demolished, villagers are either turned into demon snacks or kidnapped, and little Adlet is left as the sole survivor. Guess his party invite got lost in the mail. Fueled by a vendetta as fiery as his hair, which, let's be honest, is probably trying to escape from his head, Adlet tracks down Acro Spiker. He's basically like, hey, I want to be the strongest person in the world. Can you help me? And don't worry, I promise I won't whine too much. Acro Spiker, clearly with a penchant for cruelty, says yes, turning Adlet into a training dummy. Adlet's transformation from village survivor to self-proclaimed world's greatest involves a lot of sweat, tears, and probably a few broken bones. Fast forward to the present, and Adlet comes to, groggy but alive, with Flamey patching up his wounds. It's not exactly the kind of tender care you'd expect, but considering Flamey's usual icy demeanor, it's almost sweet. Adlet, of course, isn't one to appreciate the effort. Instead, he's probably just relieved to still be breathing, because let's face it, his luck has been as shaky as his decision-making lately. Flamey, still suspicious, is watching him closely, probably wondering if he's just a wannabe brave pretending to be something more. To get her off his back and probably to avoid any more awkward stares, Adlet dives into his tragic backstory, because if there's anything that makes someone look more legit, it's a good old-fashioned sob story. He starts recounting his past, talking about how he was taught to fight and even picked up some science along the way, all thanks to his cruel master, Acro Spiker. Adlet paints a picture of a childhood filled with brutal training sessions, not exactly the stuff of heroic fairy tales. Then the story takes a darker turn as Adlet recalls the day Huma, specifically a lizard-like humanoid creature with 3 wings, came to his village. This wasn't just any run-of-the-mill monster. This was the one that wrecked Adlet's life. The Huma's arrival led to the death of Adlet's best friend and his sister, leaving him behind to grapple with his losses. As Adlet speaks, Flamey, normally cold and detached, listens intently. Something clicks for her, and she confirms that this very same Huma is the one who convinced her mother to give birth to her. It's a shared moment of grim realization, and suddenly, Flamey's usual icy wall cracks just a little. She tells Adlet about her own past, revealing that her mother, a demon, pretended to love her. Flamey's story is just as tragic, if not more so. After failing to meet her mother's expectations, her own mother tried to kill her. Talk about family drama. This betrayal from the one person who should have cared for her fuels Flamey's rage, and she explains that this is why she turned against her kind. Now, her sole mission is to take revenge on the Majin. In this moment, they're not just 2 strangers on a mission, they're 2 people bound by a shared need to fight back against the world that wronged them. And for the first time, it seems like maybe, just maybe, Adlet isn't as alone as he always claims to be. With her tragic past laid out for Adlet to see, Flamey decides it's time to part ways. She's not the type for prolonged heart-to-hearts, and besides, there are still demons to deal with. Before she takes off to rejoin the other Braves, she hands Adlet a magical tracking item. Think of it like a medieval GPS with a bit of sparkle, a foolproof way for her to keep tabs on him, just in case his penchant for reckless heroism leads him into yet another disaster. Adlet watches her walk away, probably wondering if he should have invested in better life insurance, given how often he finds himself dodging death. While Flemmy heads back to the others inside the temple, the rest of the Braves are already cooking up their next brilliant plan. Only this time, the plan involves capturing and killing Adlet. Because, nothing says trustworthy comrades like plotting to take out the guy who keeps calling himself the strongest in the world. Adlet's reputation isn't exactly doing him any favors here. The next day, the Braves are back in action, prowling around like a pack of over-caffeinated hunters. They decided to split into 3 teams for maximum efficiency. Because there's one thing the Braves love, it's a good strategy session. Flamey pairs up with Mora, who's about as serious as a tax audit, making it an odd duo. Meanwhile, Naxania teams up with Goldov, her ever-loyal knight, who's probably still trying to wrap his head around the whole betrayal situation. And finally, Hans is saddled with Chimut, who is as unpredictable as ever. Honestly, it's like they're all auditioning for some twisted reality TV show called Brave Survivor, Demons and Drama Edition. As Adlet figures out that the Braves have started their search for him, he sees this as a golden opportunity to sneak back into the temple and retrieve his gear. Because, let's face it, being under-equipped is not a great look when you're running from your fellow heroes. However, his plan takes a nosedive when he runs into Hans. It's like a bad sequel where the hero's nemesis finds him first. Hans, being the ever-vigilant assassin, doesn't waste a moment and launches an immediate attack as soon as he spots Adlet. The clash between Adlet and Hans is like watching 2 caffeinated squirrels in a wrestling match, frenzied and relentless. Adlet, in a desperate bid to prove he's not a two-faced traitor, chucks all his weapons, including the ever-reliable bombs. Now he's down to just his sword, hoping it's enough to fend off Hans. But Hans, never one to take things at face value, is more suspicious than a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. He's convinced that Adlet's hiding something up his sleeve. Hans's intuition is spot on. Adlet's sword, it turns out, doubles as a firearm. Who knew that the guy who brags about being the strongest also has a sword that's basically a Swiss Army knife with delusions of grandeur? Adlet decides to show off his aim, but in an act of sheer theatricality, he deliberately misses Hans. Because nothing says trust me like firing a bullet into the air instead of your opponent. Hans, still not buying Adlet's act, is less convinced than a skeptical audience at a magician's show. In a twist of psychological drama, Hans decides to up the ante by creating a horrifying illusion of himself slitting Adlet's throat. It's like an escape room challenge, but with slightly more bloodshed. Adlet quickly sees through the mirage it's all smoke and mirrors. When he asks Hans about this little game, Hans explains with all the seriousness of a somber detective, and he's testing Adlet's reaction to death. Apparently, when people think they're about to meet their maker, they can't lie. Adlet's poker face is as solid as ever, and Hans, having seen no cracks in his story, finally buys into the fact that Adlet might not be a double agent. Meanwhile, the other Braves are still in a high-stakes game of who's the real Brave. Maxitania, for instance, has her suspicions firmly trained on Hans. She's convinced that he might be the fake Brave and roped Goldov into helping her confirm her theory. Because, nothing says teamwork like turning your comrades into potential suspects. While Nashitania and Goldov are out there playing detective, Adlet is still stuck at the temple, searching for clues. His luck runs out when they bump into Chimut. Now, Chimut is not your average Brave. She's the saint of swamps, and her idea of a good time involves summoning demons from within her own swampy gut. Think of it as her version of a magic trick, but instead of pulling a rabbit out of a hat, she's pulling demons out of her stomach. It's like she's hosting a dinner party and forgot to mention the main course was demon surprise. Chimut decides that the best way to root out the fake Brave is to simply kill everyone, because why go for subtlety when you can go for a full-blown massacre? She summons her demonic pals from her swampy digestive tract, launching a full-scale attack on both of them. The battle against Chimut feels more like trying to beat an unbeatable video game level. No matter how many times they take down her fiends, they just keep regenerating. It's like a nightmare on repeat, with each fiend bouncing back from the dead, leaving Adlet muttering to himself about how this whole strongest man in the world thing was supposed to be easier. His usual bag of tricks isn't doing much good when every punch he throws is undone in seconds. Hans, on the other hand, is quick on his feet, literally, but even he's getting tired of this endless loop. They quickly realize the only way to stop Chimut's endless parade of fiends is to take Chimut herself out of the equation. The girl might be as unbothered as a cat napping in a sunbeam, but even she's got limits. With a plan that's more desperate than brilliant, they go after Chimut directly, hoping that incapacitating her will finally stop the fiends. And surprise, it works. Timecodes is down and the fiends stop regenerating. Victory, at least for now, and Adlet can't help but throw in a smug "told you I'm the strongest" look, despite being half dead from exhaustion. They manage to capture Timecodes, who's about as cooperative as a toddler refusing to nap. Adlet, ever the optimist, tries to interrogate her about the barrier's activation. But Timecodes, in her signature "I couldn't care less" style, shakes her head. No clues from her, just more dead ends. Adlet can't help but think, great, just what I needed. More mysteries and no answers. Still determined to crack this case wide open, Adlet decides to get a little more creative. He pulls out the bomb that Flamey gave him, using it to send her a signal. If nothing else, maybe she can lend some logic to this chaos. Flamey, of course, notices the signal because, unlike Adlet, she actually knows how to use her brain more than her fists. They meet up, and Adlet dives headfirst into his latest hypothesis, a grand theory involving a saint's involvement in the barrier's activation. He throws around ideas like they're confetti at a party, excited to figure out something. But Flamey, being the queen of cold hard reality, quickly shoots him down. She points out all the glaring flaws in his theory, leaving Adlet feeling like a student who just got schooled by the teacher in front of the entire class. She's not impressed by his half-baked detective work, and Adlet, still bruised from his earlier battle and now from his bruised ego, can only grumble in response. Meanwhile, back at the temple, Hans is delivering the same pitch to Mora, trying to convince her that a saint might be behind the barrier's activation. But Mora, who's got the patience of a brick wall, isn't having any of it. She refuses to even entertain the possibility, leaving Hans frustrated and wondering why everyone in this group has such a knack for ignoring perfectly good ideas. Timecodes, of course, is still out of commission, not that she would have added much to the conversation anyway. She's just as indifferent as ever, not particularly concerned with all the back and forth about who did what and why. It's just another day for her. Nakshitania, on the other hand, is quietly checking in with Goldov, confirming whether anyone has died by looking at her crest. She's got her own way of figuring things out, and it doesn't involve shouting theories at everyone like Adlet does. But as usual, even this bit of calm is tinged with suspicion, because with all that's going on, it's hard to know who to trust. As the group prepares to move forward, the tension in the air is thicker than ever. Everyone's second-guessing everyone else, and Adlet, true to form, is at the center of the storm, convinced he's onto something even though half his ideas get shot down faster than he can come up with them. But that's just another day in the life of the self-proclaimed strongest man in the world, who, if we're being honest, could probably stand to lose a little of the ego and gain a little more common sense. Things go south quickly when Adlet, in a moment of misplaced bravery or maybe just bad timing, confesses his feelings to Flamey. Flamey starts thinking Adlet might be trying to pull a fast one on her. It's like he's trying to charm his way out of a jam, but it's only making her more suspicious. Meanwhile, Hans' attempt to explain what went down only convinces Mora that Adlet is indeed the fake brave. It's like a terrible game of telephone, but with more swords and fewer misunderstandings. Mora, who's not one to sit idly by, decides to take matters into her own hands. She uses her telepathy because why not add a bit of psychic drama to the mix, and orders all the braves to capture Adlet. And just for extra drama, she tells Nakshitania and Goldov that Adlet almost killed Hans. Cue the dramatic music because Nakshitania's rage is about to hit the roof. When Mora's orders come through, Flamey doesn't waste a second. She's on Adlet like a hawk on a hamster. Adlet has no choice but to hightail it out of there with Flamey hot on his heels. She's even signaling to the other braves about his location, making him a moving target. Mora, ever the eager beaver, sees the signal and charges in like a knight on a mission. Now Adlet is stuck in the middle of a 2-on-1 brawl, which isn't exactly ideal for him. With Mora's fierce attacks and Flamey's relentless pursuit, it's like he's caught in a really bad episode of Survivor. In a moment of dramatic self-sacrifice, Adlet decides to put on his hero hat and tries to convince Mora that Flamey is innocent. He's basically betting that if Mora kills him and finds out he's not the fake brave, at least Flamey won't get the shaft. It's like a last-ditch plea for peace, and it's heartwarming in a tragic, I'm probably going to get knocked out kind of way. Touched by Adlet's gesture, Flamey decides to return the favor and trusts him. She intervenes just in time to stop Mora from delivering the final blow and gets Adlet out of there. They don't get far before Nakshitania and Goldov, now more convinced than ever that Adlet is the fake brave, block their path. What follows is a 3-against-2 showdown. Adlet and Flamey find themselves cornered, facing off against their 3 opponents. It's like being in a video game with the odds stacked against them, except the stakes are much higher, and there's no cheat code for survival. With the situation getting messier than a toddler's art project, Adlet and Flamey split up. Adlet heads back to the temple to reunite with Hans and get some much-needed backup, while Flamey takes on the impossible task of holding off Nakshitania and her crew. Adlet manages to slip away from the fight, but poor Flamey isn't so lucky. She fights valiantly, but her stamina is shot, and eventually, she's overpowered by the relentless onslaught. Nexhenia and Goldov catch up with Adlet, who's now in worse shape than a balloon at a porcupine party. His energy is drained, his injuries are piling up, and he's feeling more battered than a piñata at a birthday bash. Goldov finally manages to subdue him, and just when things seem bleakest, Nexhenia and the others regroup. To everyone's surprise, Hans and Chemut, who were supposed to be dealing with their own issues, walk towards them looking as fresh as daisies. Hans is unscathed, contrary to Mora's earlier claim that he was gravely injured. Nexhenia, finally catching a break from her own whirlwind of chaos, realizes Adlet's innocence. With a heavy sigh of relief, she apologizes to him as if to say, "Oops, my bad. I guess you're not the villain in this soap opera after all." Adlet, looking as dumb at the situation as a guy who's had 7 straight Mondays, steps up with a theory that's spicier than anything you find in a hot sauce challenge. In true Adlet fashion, he doesn't just dabble in theories, he goes all in. According to him, the mist surrounding the shrine isn't some harmless weather phenomenon. Nope, he insists it was created by extreme heat, and there's only one person capable of pulling that off, Ryra, the elusive Saint of Sun, who's conveniently gone missing. Adlet spins his wild tale with gusto, theorizing that Ryra was kidnapped and forced to raise the temperature for over a week, cooking up the conditions for the fog to appear. Then, as soon as one of the Braves opened the temple doors, they killed Ryra, causing the temperature to drop suddenly and triggering the mist. To cover up the crime, Akuma supposedly gobbled up her body, hiding all traces of the crime. A plot so outrageous it could only come from the mind of the self-proclaimed strongest man in the world. Naturally, Adlet doesn't stop there. He's not content to just throw out a theory, he wants proof. To put his idea to the test, he sends Hans off on a grim scavenger hunt to find Ryra's body. And wouldn't you know it, Hans comes through like a cat spotting a laser pointer, finding Ryra's body faster than anyone expected. With the body now confirmed, Adlet doesn't waste a second before pointing the accusatory finger at Mora, confidently declaring her the fake Brave. Of course, Adlet's theory may be wild, but he delivers it with such flair that even the most skeptical among them are left questioning if maybe, just maybe, he's onto something. Just when Adlet's feeling smug about his detective work, Chemut and Hans throw a wrench into his genius deduction. They reveal their findings because of course they've been busy while Adlet was busy being, well, Adlet. They've dubbed up copies of the artifact complete with equipment needed to activate the barrier, and the second artifact clearly lays out the actual steps. Cast a spell, smash the artifact, and voila, barrier activated. This bombshell discovery flips everything on its head, and suddenly everyone's eyes shift to Nexhenia. Why? Because it was Nexhenia who conveniently destroyed the artifact the moment they stepped into the shrine. The oops did I do that? Moment now seems more like, oops, I just exposed myself as the fake Brave. Adlet's memory is working overtime now. He vividly recalls that Nexhenia was the one who suggested he go first to the temple. It's like a neon sign pointing directly at her, flashing guilty. With all the damning evidence piling up, Nexhenia finally cracks and admits she's the fake Brave. But in typical melodramatic fashion, she doesn't just confess, she goes all in, explaining that her grand plan is to kill off the Braves and create a world where humans and demons can live together peacefully. The catch: about 500,000 humans would need to be sacrificed for this little utopia to work out. Casual, right. Adlet, for once in his chaotic existence, is genuinely taken aback. Hearing her twisted vision makes him realize Nexhenia has been siding with the demons all along. He spent the entire journey fighting demons and fellow Braves, only to find out that one of his own was plotting the ultimate betrayal right under his nose. It's a bitter pill to swallow, but given Adlet's track record, he's used to things not going according to plan. Adlet, fueled by rage and betrayal, orders his comrades to finish Nexhenia off, but in true villain fashion, she slips through their grasp before anyone can land a blow. She vanishes into the night like a bad plot twist, leaving Adlet collapsing from blood loss. The man's been through enough beatings to last a lifetime, and now he's paying the price. When Adlet finally comes to, he finds Mora sitting beside him. She's not exactly winning any Best Teammate awards, but at least she apologizes for doubting him and failing to see through Nexhenia's act. It's a moment of awkward sympathy, with Mora trying to patch things up after almost being part of the Let's Kill Adlet club. Outside, Goldov is a wreck. He's moping around like a lovesick puppy, still in denial about Nexhenia's betrayal. It's like someone told him his favorite hero turned villain. And now he's got a personal storm cloud hovering over his head. Poor guy, he's probably still clinging to the idea that Nexhenia was just misunderstood. The next day, the barrier around the shrine finally disappears, and the Braves start gearing up for their final mission, taking on the demon god. But as if this adventure wasn't chaotic enough, a new twist comes in the form of a woman named Rolonia, who casually shows up and apologizes for being late because of course the barrier held her back. The real kicker. Rolonia is also one of the Braves. Yup, because nothing says epic quest like discovering yet another surprise teammate when you thought the drama was over. With everyone already mentally exhausted, they decide to put off figuring out who the next fake Brave might be. After all, there's no time for another round of trust issues when the demon god is waiting to turn the world into a fiery hellscape. And so, with confusion swirling around them, the 7 remaining heroes set off toward the territory of the demon god. The anime ends with the group walking toward the territory of the demon god, leaving us all wondering if they'll ever catch a break or if Adlet's going to end up in more trouble than ever. Chances are, it's the latter. And that wraps up our today recap, and if you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next one.